everyone, welcome to I'm Not a Fan Unless I Have a Podcast. I'm John Hanford, and thank you so much for subscribing on YouTube, listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you for listening and subscribing. Give me a follow on the Instagram at GizFanPod. I really appreciate it. And we've got a lot of... I mean, this is... King Gizzard is just such a fucking great band, and I've just reminded this of just new things happen every week, it seems, that make me love this band even more. I read this article, somebody posted in the fan page on Facebook, that I think it was an NME article. I'm pretty sure it was NME, and it was just a feature piece or an interview with Joey. And I'm just like, fuck, man, these are the conversations that like I've had on this podcast. And it was so cool to see Joey, I don't know. Like, we've had a lot of Joey talk on this podcast. And to see it like from Joey himself in a major news publication, music news publication, it was just cool to see that we're thinking along the same lines. That there's nothing cooler to me than to just be on the same wavelength as like your favorite artist or baseball player or whoever. Just like in my experience, baseball players, I've grew up a diehard baseball fan, and I used to work in baseball, so it was always cool to interact and shit. Anyway, that's just something I wanted to throw out there, acknowledge. Definitely check out that article. I think it was something about King Gizzard being divisive, like the most divisive King Gizzard is yet to come. And he was saying that, basically like, get ready for 2021. Like, there's going to be more new music. Maybe other bands or other members of the band have alluded to this on the Reddits, on the AMAs and whatnot. I am not savvy with Reddit, so I just wait to hear about it from other people who are. But yeah, it was cool to get that confirmation that like next year is going to be a great Giz year as well. This year, despite the Red Rocks shows and all the marathon shows and tours not happening, we do have to appreciate what King Gizzard has done for us, the fans, this year. And I don't think any of us have taken it for granted, but maybe some have. I don't know. I'm really jacked up on caffeine right now, so I apologize if I'm going all over the place. Let's see. I did want to say, yeah. So speaking of new music, last week King Gizzard announced on Instagram, I think in one of their stories, that this week we would have new music from them. And something that I picked up on over the summer when they were releasing their singles from KG was that the singles would often drop maybe an hour or two or just a few hours after I would release each podcast episode, on a Tuesday, maybe sometimes a Thursday, because I used to do 2 a week. And like every time that they would release a podcast or that they would release a song, I would release my podcast just before, and I wouldn't even acknowledge, I wouldn't, because the time didn't really sync up. I don't know. Maybe this is just one of my weird, like neuroticisms, insecurities. Just that, like, I would like to at least acknowledge when new music is coming out, the day it does come out, if my podcast is coming out on that same day. So the point in bringing that up is my friend Abby, who we know from I think episode 37, maybe 35, the episode titled "Cookie Saved My Life." She posted that she had a feeling that King Gizzard would be dropping their new music today, because that just seems to be the timeline. And I was just like, yep, You're 100% right. And here we are. There's, I'm releasing this podcast a few hours later than normal because I wanted to take into account this possible new music. And of course, as fate would have it, once you start planning for something, the rug will be pulled right out from under you. No new music today as of yet. 8:37 a.m. Pacific time on on Tuesday. That's the time I'm recording this intro. But yeah, whatever. In any case, in this episode, we dissect the new album. We dissect KG, talk about Live in San Francisco, and a whole host of other things. Life stuff. Stuff about the future, current events. This was a really fun episode. And I'm so excited to have him back on the podcast. And this is his first video appearance on the pod. I think he was he was one of my first guests back when this was audio only. And he's an admin and a co-creator of the Facebook fan page that has, approximately 30,000 members. Congrats to you and your team. Everybody, please welcome to the podcast once again, Dave. The desert, the internet is very kind of it fluctuates. So yeah, thanks for bearing with me.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, dude. First of all, thank you so much for coming back on the podcast. I've been wanting to do this for a while, and I wanted to have like a good excuse to do it. Obviously, with the double release of KG and Live in San Francisco 16. I guess like also just they've released so much shit this year, and like now we've seen, I guess, probably the final release. So we can kind of unpack, like I guess 11 months worth of stuff. But specifically, KG, what a record!
Yeah, it's definitely really good. And the singles didn't really they were great singles and they were good on their own, but in the context of the whole album, they really fit in. So I really think that the singles really helped pull the whole album together and make it super cohesive.
Yeah, actually, that's an interesting way of looking at it, because I had this thought, like this notion came to me while I was listening to the album yesterday, that like maybe I shouldn't have listened to the singles so much, because like I anticipated that those would be like the biggest, best tracks, and like they were also giving me like an idea about what the album was going to be that turned out not to be accurate. Aside from being microtonal, like I was thinking like there'd be a little more, it'd be more like contrast based, and because like seeing Some of Us, after Straws in the Wind, and like how different those two are from Honey, and then Automation, sort of like going back to basics, sort of, for Giz. And then all of a sudden now we got like Ontology, Minimum Brain Size, and obviously Intrasport, like which might be the best, like better tracks than the singles, arguably. But so for me, like this album has already just forced its way into my top 5 Giz albums. The thing that sticks out to me a lot is how poppy it is, which I think it speaks to Joey's growing influence in the band.
Yeah, Joey's done a lot of growing lately. And I had this revelation the other day, like taking all of his work with the band into consideration and looking at his lyrics compared to Stu's lyrics. Stu's lyrics seem to be in general more prophetic and kind of reflective. But if you look at a lot of Joey's lyrics, they seem a lot more psychedelic, kind of cerebral. He paints these strange pictures that, Stu doesn't really do that often. Stu likes to focus on the outside world and kind of talk about either the beauty of nature or what he thinks is happening to the world around him. But if you look at Joey's lyrics, they're kind of, I want to say like postmodern. They're just kind of very, I would say psychedelic or cerebral. They're not really tangible. What do you think about that?
Yeah, because like Joey's always had just some of the most heartfelt lyrics. I think like Stu,
Yeah.
you know, he pulls a lot from fantasy and stuff he reads, which is so cool. Um, but Joey, it seems like he's got a lot of like he just has a lot of his own thoughts, um, and he's also, I mean, he just has a way with words, and imagery and stuff, like just about describing like just individual snapshots of feelings, you know.
Yeah.
Cookie's kind of the same way in that regard, but he takes like sort of a, I don't know, I guess a little more of like a stoic type of like observational approach,
Yeah.
whereas Joey's just like, hey, I'm gonna like get right into like possibly even something you've been thinking about, um but I'm just gonna hit it so fucking hard, right on the nail, just with, and it's gonna be brought with some sense of pop. And
Yeah.
um I mean, like Intersport, tremendous song. Minimum Brain Size, I felt though was just such a, I mean, that was just straight up truth. um
Yeah.
and I never
That,
would
that
have.
song was a grower. I had to listen to it a few times to really get the appreciative nature of it.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, initially it was like I was hooked from the, you know, from the intro, like the guitar riff at the beginning. But
Mhm.
then once I like read the lyrics, and I'm just like, oh yeah, this reminds me of a lot of people I know. Like, uh, yeah, it just made me it made me really appreciate it. And I did talk about this with some other people, and one thing that one guy said was how they like with Minimum Brain Size, how that's one of the first tracks where they're not really putting any effects on the vocals. Like they're like, you get to hear Joey singing and like speaking clearly.
Mhm.
Like it was like as if not to mince words. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I like this album just has so many different little messages, and you know, coupled with just some really mind bending music, you know.
Yeah, for sure. One thing that I was kind of annoyed though is, I mean, I'm stewarding the page, making sure on the fan page everything's going well. I just remember back in 2017 when Full Metal, not Full Metal, Flying Microtonal Banana came out and it had Volume 1. Everyone was saying, when's Volume 2 coming out? When's Volume 2 coming out? And now Volume 2 is finally out, and people are like, this King is album isn't really anything new. It's very derivative. Like the Enemy had that not so great review of the album,
Yeah.
and they were they're not, they're just sticking to their old tricks. They're not doing anything new. It's like, well, you're asking for Microtonal too, so they're kind of repeating some things before, but a lot of people are saying that this album is just a fusion of a lot of their elements from different albums together. Like you can say Honey is like Flying Microtonal Banana plus Paper Mache Dream Balloon, and then you can say like pull some Infets the Rasnets and put that into the Hungry Wolf of Fate or
Hmm.
something like that. But I think a lot of the songs on KG mirror some songs from Flying Microtonal Banana. Like there's a lot of similar rhythms and a lot of similar effects. So I feel like the two are really nice companions to one another. And of course, people have done the work of having the wind that fades out of Flying Microtonal Banana and that fades into KGLW. So
Yeah. Yeah, and like there's a little bit of that wind at the end of the Hungry Wolf of Fate,
yeah,
which, but like you notice it's and like somebody on the fan page pointed this out, like it was like it ends a little abruptly, you know,
yeah.
as if like, okay, so LW is going to be volume 3 basically. And
Who knows
but
what
yeah,
it'll be?
it's all speculation, but it feels real.
Yeah.
um
One thing that I'm gonna knock on wood. I hope that LW isn't their last album, because they had that T-shirt that was released and it had all their albums listed, and then it had KG and LW were the last ones. And some people are worried that LW might be their last, but I don't want to be that kind of guy who's saying that's going to be their last one. But a lot of people are saying, oh, they're they're drawing on their last few albums, but I think they've still got a lot of energy. They've had 16 albums in 10 years, and I don't think they have any signs of slowing down, apart from the fact that some of them are getting families. Like Stu had a baby recently.
mhm.
Congratulations to Stu if you're listening. But a lot of people are scared, and I hope their fears are unfounded, but you know, that's one conspiracy theory that people are promoting.
Yeah, I mean, and like I've thought about that plenty. Like, like even after like just after I got into Giz, I was thinking like, okay, well, there's so much, like they have so much more discography than I mean, like than Black Sabbath even. Like some of my favorite bands and stuff. And um so like if they were to just be like, all right, that's it for Giz, it would be like, okay, because you know that they're still gonna, it's not like they're gonna stop making music. Like you still got Murlocs, you still got, Joey's project with Bolant and Pipe Eye with Cookie, and like who's to say that they wouldn't just evolve into some other iteration that would still be sick. And like there's so much there's so much just to endlessly appreciate about them. Like I would say bring it on, like
Yeah.
um and then let's see the world fucking crumble. Like I remember when when Eric left, it was, it was just a fucking dagger being twisted in my heart,
Yeah, it was doom and gloom, and people were like, "Is this the end? Is this the end of the band?" But one thing to remember is there's 7 people in this band. That means 7 people always constantly interacting, 7 egos constantly bumping up against each other. The Beatles had four people, and they broke up, and there was 4 of them, and their egos were. I'm not saying that King Gizzard has the same ego problem that the Beatles did in their ending years. It's just you're still dealing with 7 people, and 7 people have different wants, and they have different needs. Who knows? Maybe they might not want to do music. Maybe they'll move into something else like art or writing or filmmaking or something.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll team up with PHC and to make some sort of just a media corporation or something. I don't know.
I like how we're about 15 minutes into this and we're all just like, what if Giz is done?
Yeah, no, we don't want to be apocalyptic about them, but yeah, I'm in the camp that they're not gonna break up anytime soon.
Yeah,
I know that there are people out there who are like, oh, they've peaked, they've made their best work already, they should just like ride off into the sunset. But let them do what they want to do, let them create, let them be them.
Yeah, there are so many bands. I mean, well, take Hawkwind for example. Like Hawkwind, they've been around since like 1970 basically, and sure, different members in the band, but like they released an album I think a year or two ago that was an acoustic album, and it was great. Like there's still, like just because you might have had like your hits, early on when you were in your 20s, like that's pretty natural. You'd have like the hardest hitting shit early, like System of a Down for example. Like they like their first 3 albums hit pretty hard, and then once they got into like their late 30s and 40s, they're just like we'll be a little more melodic and stuff. And
mm-hmm.
It's just a natural evolution of like navigating life as a musician, I think.
Yeah. And they've kind of established themselves already. Like maybe for their first 5 or 6 albums, when they were relatively unknown, they were still hungry for that, chasing that feeling of success. And now they've obviously gotten that success. I personally think they're probably the best live band, if not the best band in the world right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope they keep chasing that, and I hope they keep putting out good stuff. But I hope it's not over.
Yeah, I mean I just don't see any way that it'll be over. I just see this all as like a constant evolution, It's
right.
And yeah, like that's what keeps me sane. And also like, just in being a creative person, like, and for like myself, like I shoved down my creativity for a while, just trying to like blend into corporate life and stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
I saw what that did to me. It's unnatural. So like, clearly they're onto something in terms of like obviously, but like they know what they're doing in terms of like how they approach whatever anxieties and stuff. They're just like, oh no, that just means something to the effect of God's telling me to create. And so that doesn't worry me. But back to the album, so there were a lot of different sounds that they explored. And one that got me thoroughly confused initially was Some of Us.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously now it seems to make a little more sense. Now what I'm confused by is The Hungry Wolf of Fate. That's a track I don't quite know what to make of it. I was surprised that when that poll was posted in the fan page, um, of what everybody's favorite track was, that
Mhm.
was like the second most liked. I
Yeah.
that surprised me.
Yeah, it didn't really surprise me that much. I think a lot of people jumped onto the King Gizzard bandwagon towards the tail end of 2017. You have Murder of the Universe, you have um, Infest the Rat's Nest, you have the people who love metal, the Great Chain of Being, Superbug, the kind
Yeah.
of slow stoner doom sludge kind of metal, and I think the Hungry Wolf of Fate did touch on those a lot, and it was kind of the heaviest. It's obviously the heaviest track on the album, and
Yeah.
it a lot of it reminded me a lot of the Doom City, especially with the wah guitar. So a lot of
Oh
people
yeah.
loved that sound, that wah sound that it had, and I think it reminded a lot of people of Doom City.
Yeah, I didn't make that connection before, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
I also liked how in Odd Life they used the same kind of walk down as in Billabong Valley.
yeah,
It's yeah, but just like way faster. It
yeah.
was there are so many like little callbacks,
Right.
to like their past work
Yeah, and
in this album.
ontology, the drumming is almost the same as Open Water. I don't say
Hmm.
exactly the same, but they're very similar. Odd Life is my favorite song on the album. I just think it's so mysterious, and I love. There's that instrument. I think it might be like a Makoto or some sort of strange instrument. The one at the beginning. I can't even tell what it is. I can't wait till the album comes out on vinyl so I can actually see the credits to see
Yeah,
what instruments they used. But it's such a mysterious song, and the subject matter is so it's so personal. It's all about how they go on tour and their this crazy life that they lead as musicians, just performing, going crazy, going back to the bus, going to another place, doing this whole crazy endless cycle. And Stu is reflecting on like how the rock and roll music is bad for his ears and the headbanging is bad for his brain. So his health is being affected personally by going out and performing and doing all this stuff for the crowd. But it's just, and then Ambrose has his, people are saying he raps, but he has his little verse at the end
yeah,
where he's talking about, oh, like he's talking about the physical and mental tolls of what it's like to be in a band, how there's promoters everywhere and you're driving around and you don't know where you are one day, next day you're super excited and then you're drinking. It's like, the adrenaline of it, and then followed by the alcohol or booze or whatever, and weed or whatever he likes to consume, just all mixed together in this crazy long tour. I think it was kind of a reflection on probably the Chunky tour because they're going all over Europe.
hmm
He's,
I
so
mean,
yeah, that's my little odd life rant.
yeah, I mean that's a great rant. um, and yeah, I mean like there are so many different what one sort of thing that I was thinking about with this album, like a common theme with all these different songs, is like they're sort of creating like a little snapshot of like just different parts of life, and like
Yeah.
whether it's like the immediate fear of automation
Hmm.
coming in, and that feels very real with with everything that's going on.
Yeah.
And I mean, between that minimum brain size, just like you never would have thought that King Gizzard would be writing a song, just like calling you stupid, but
Yeah.
here we are, and it is kind of earned. But there's like these different little things, and and with obviously like Some of Us, where it's just Cookie's painting a very bleak picture of, like we all turn into dust,
Yeah.
or at
I
least
think
some of us
Cookie,
feel like that. But
I think that song is Cookie's kind of um delving into deep, like this, the concept of deep time, where time isn't just this whatever 80 86 to 100 years that we live on this planet. It's thousands and thousands of years into the past and thousands of years into the future, where you're insignificant. All of the past um, sort of traditions and religions that have sparked up in the past, just they crumbled away, and now they turn into dust or fossils. And it's just he's talking about time on a grander scale. And it's kind of strange that he didn't sing that song. I think maybe he just thought Stu's voice and the vocal effects would be more resounding on that. But we all know that Cookie's really shy, so who knows?
yeah, yeah. I mean, God, if he did sing that song though, uh, I mean, it might even cut deeper, um,
Yeah.
just because it's like I think that might be. I mean, to me, I think that might be the deepest song on the album in terms of the lyrics.
Yeah.
Just because it's such an objective viewpoint.
Yeah.
On like
I think it also is kind of, I wouldn't say a sequel to, but it reminds me a lot of Dusk to Dawn on Lygon Street, just in the way that it's patterned, because it's like the rhyming, I wouldn't say the rhyming, kind of the way that the words flow is very similar to that song. So you could take Some of Us and slow it down and add some jazzy instruments. You can have, a companion song to Dusk to Dawn. They're very similar in their structure, the two songs.
Yeah, God, I've not considered that. Now I kind of want to like just listen to them back to back and like maybe even slow down Some of Us, but yeah, it's fascinating. And then with Live in San Francisco,
Oh yeah.
that was such a like it's taken me a little longer to get into it, obviously because like I know the songs already.
Yeah.
And it is kind of weird to have like two albums released on the same day.
Right.
So
You still have to absorb one before you take the other one up. And I mean, they did release whatever. How many live albums did they release this year? Like 5 or 6?
Yeah.
A lot. So, it's a lot of live music that we're getting, a lot of songs that have been repeated across multiple live albums. But yeah, I listened to Live in San Francisco last night on vinyl, actually. I got the ATO version.
Nice.
And I was just filled with many, many emotions. The first of which being just like, God, I remember, it made me kind of remember how much I love this band, because it brought me back to those simpler days where they only had, 9 albums, 10 albums. And
I like how those are simpler days. 9 or 10 albums.
Yeah, that album that Live in San Francisco was recorded May 25th, 2016. I was scheduled to see them May 14th or 13th of that same year in Boston, but I had to sell my ticket because I had family occasions. And I'm just now listening to this album. I'm like, that's what I missed. I missed that, and I'm just so bummed. And it's so bittersweet listening to that vinyl and being like, I could have been there. Not on that particular album, but I could have been at that show, because that's when they were playing. They were playing their Nonagon, they were playing their Mind Fuzz, they threw in The River, they threw in Hit on Pill,
and Trapdoor.
There's and I'm not saying that their newer stuff is not as good. It's just that there's just so much of it that now when you see King Giz live, they have to pack their shows with little tidbits of every single album. And you lose some of the stuff that you might personally love. Like if you got into them in the Nonagon days, nowadays they might play 1 or 2 songs from Nonagon. They might not play any songs from Nonagon. They might pack it full of their newer stuff. And I know they do try to play whatever songs from the albums that just were most recently released during their tour. So like they most recently are playing their Fishing for Fishies and Rat's Nest stuff. But every show is a little bit different. But yeah, this album just made me be like, okay, they're playing their stuff that the fans love, and that's what they were touring on at that time, because 2016 So Nonagon came out. So
yeah, and they played at the Independent, which is a pretty small venue. Like, I mean, I saw, like, I went there once. I saw the Meat Puppets and Cass McCombs play, and it was like, I think its capacity is like a little under 1,000. There might even be 500, but yeah, like
that's back when they were playing pretty small clubs, small venues.
I mean, like, yeah, and then especially in the beginning, just when they're starting Robot Stop, you hear that girl in the front go like, two drummers, it's insane. And it's just like, that's such a perfect way to set the stage for what's going down.
And then you had I don't know if it's the same girl, but someone else kept yelling "dickhead."
I think it was the same one. I think she was just she was feeling it.
But I think a lot of people who aren't OG Giz heads know that Dickhead was Joey had on one of his guitar piece of tape with the word Dickhead written on it. So I think maybe she just saw that guitar and she doesn't know the guy's name, so she just is like, "Hey, Dickhead," like Joey might have been standing right in front of her, so she's just yelling at dickhead.
Yeah.
Thing in front of her.
Yeah, and like I could totally understand from her perspective. She might think dickhead's kind of hot. I get it.
Yeah, and a lot of people were angry at her. They were like, "Oh, this woman, she's being so disrespectful." It's like, well, no, you have to understand the context. A lot of people compared her to the chunky shrapnel drunk chick who hopped on stage.
Yeah, no, totally different. Yeah. I mean, like you watch the first KEXP session. I think Joey's playing the dickhead guitar. And yeah, so like I because like he because like I got into Giz the end of 2017 and I didn't see them play until like mid 2018. So like I joined post dickhead, but it was but like I'd seen the videos and I knew the context, and yeah, I mean it was, that was just a fun like tidbit that I kind of forgotten about, and then you get to hear it. It's like, cool.
And I think in the Peeling the Microtonal Banana video, he's talking about, he says, "Oh, we have a dickhead model guitar." He has that on his microtonal guitar as well.
Yeah. Or was that the guitar that he modified into to a microtonal?
I think so. I just remember saying premium. Maybe it was a premium foot model. I don't remember.
Yeah, because like he used to, and I forget the brands of those guitars because like they're sort of weird,
Yeah.
But yeah, like there are two separate. Like he had that sort of Fender Jaguar Jaguar style guitar that was red, and then he's got the other one that's his microtonal guitar now. But it used to not be. It used to just, I guess, have a different tuning or something. But yeah, he's and then like also Lucas, I don't know if he still has bass written on a piece of tape on his bass, but yeah, it's like that was sort of like I don't know, like a relic of like their playfulness of that era. And I think
2016.
Yeah,
back in the day.
It also killed me that like I could have there were so many opportunities I had to see Giz like back in 2016, 2015, and probably 2017 as well, but I just hadn't heard of them, and instead I was just wasting my life in working all the time, and it just brought me back to like the pain that I was feeling in 2016. I was like, fuck, I could have been experiencing this.
Yeah.
But
it's also nice just to it's a nice gift to the fans, especially the newer ones, to be like, hey, this band that's really big in 2020. Well, here's what they were doing back in 2016.
Yeah, and that's something that I've like I've talked with plenty of fans on here that got into Giz like after Rat's Nest came out. Like that was their their breakthrough album, and they still had yet to explore like all these old sounds and really understand the magic of what makes Giz. And yeah, so like I hadn't really thought about it in that context, but it makes a lot of sense because yeah, I mean it does kind of put you into that sort of like I guess the rawer territory of Giz, even though they were super tight with Nonagon. Like when they did the Head on Pill suite on this live album, it wasn't nearly as fluid or together as like when they play Head on Pill now. It seemed like they were still sort of exploring like where do we want to go with this medley.
Yeah, I think they've fine crafted their ending. Whatever song they play at the end, they always like to make it an extended long jam, and they've like kind of fine tuned. All right, we're gonna play this amount of the song, and then we're gonna go into a little bit of this, and then I'm gonna play a little bit of this. And I think they just, like the Beatles, just so many hours of practicing have just made them tight and made them cohesive. Whereas, like even on if you listen to this, live in San Francisco, at one point Stu starts singing "Got Ideas," and he's like, oh, whoops, he like messes up.
Yeah,
he realizes he messed up, and he goes, wrong song, and then he goes back into Head on Pill. It's so raw and flimsy, but you love them for it. You know what I mean? It's that kind of stuff which makes you love the band. Like it reminds me a lot of when I saw the OCs. I actually saw the OCs at the same club that I was supposed to see King Giz at, and at one point, one of John Dwyer's guitar strings broke. So just the drummers are playing this crazy jam, and John Dwyer's in the back, like restringing his guitar. And it's just like, that's the stuff about a live show where things are so unpredictable and crazy. And that's just what makes them extra fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. it also kind of brings me back to like when I first discovered Giz, and like upon discovering them, I like that's when I sort of got in my head like, hey, maybe I should lose this sense of perfectionism and be like a little more out there. Just because like they had all these sorts of odd like little whether it's like a fill on the guitar or something, with like a bunch of delay effect on it, or just a weird sounding note that maybe shouldn't be there. It's like it made it clear to me like, okay, if you actually want to make great shit, you gotta just put yourself out there, be vulnerable with that. And like it's really cool to see like, yeah, just how it's progressed since then.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and then also like, I mean, if we're talking about evolution, how about those demos? Like,
Right. Yeah, I was about to say like those demos are should be. I mean, a lot of people didn't like them because they weren't perfect, but they were a nice way to show people like, hey, these songs that you love and they weren't once what they were something different to begin with, and they've gone through many takes and many iterations, and you need to perfect your craft. You need to, and I think that was kind of their gift. Like, hey, this is us at our rawest. Even I remember, I thought I read an interview that said Stu was like, yeah, I didn't really want to share this, but I think that it's a good thing for our fans to see like us even at our I wouldn't say worst, but in the process of creation.
yeah, and also even some of the songs, they just kind of stand alone on their own. Like Music to Eat Bananas To is like one of the happiest jams I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah.
And then also like the song is Dirt, and Most of What I Like on the demo versions, like I kind of like those better than than what were on the album. And it specifically just that sound, that kind of like poppy psychedelic sound, kind of Tame Impala-ish. Like that got me excited about like, okay, so here's something that they could also go into, which I guess we did kind of see with Intrasport, and like and I guess a little bit with kind of like with even with This Thing that Joey wrote, like that's kind of poppy and like fascinating. The electronic part in Acarin.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they have a lot of pop in them that I didn't really pay attention to until the demos kind of highlighted it, and now KG's kind of thrown more of it in our face. But yeah, like, and then also like with the other tracks, like Evil Death Roll, like the original thing, it's just like, wow, like that was, I agree with Stu, that was a ballsy thing to release on its own, like because it's just a very simple, basic guitar riff.
Kind of like surf rock.
Yeah, it's like kind of like a surf rock going, like morphing into metal a little bit.
Yeah. And then they took Automation, which was like, I think I remember when they were they interviewed Stu about Infest the Rat's Nest, and he said, yeah, there was another song that was on this album, but I scrapped it. I think that song was Automation, but then they took the lyrics from Automation and they turned it to this microtonal song, which is on KG, which is, I think, better than the one on the demos. But
yeah, it's for me, it's definitely more listenable. And also like they've kind of got that drum beat that sounds similar to Muddy Water, and it's and so like it was also kind of a fun way to because like I'm a little all over the place, but I think I got it now. With the like with the singles that they released kind of being drastically different from each other, up until Automation, like, well, in Automation also drastically different, but being that last single that was released, it was like kind of I don't know, I guess like a sign of comfort for a lot of Giz fans. Like, okay, we're not losing that sound, but also get ready for this other stuff. Like it seemed to be an indicator that they're still willing to cater to people's tastes and what got them into the band, but also just like, guys, strap in. We're going to be going on some other tours, like some more adventures and shit.
Yeah. And you're right about the fact that all of the singles sounded so differently, because when Honey first came out, that was the first new thing that they put out in a while. People were like, oh, it's going to be microtonal paper mache. So it's going to be an acoustic album with, with microtones. And then some of us came out and it's like, wait, no, this is microtonal, but it's a little bit more heavy. And then Straws in the Wind came out and people were like, okay. I mean, all the Ambi fans were happy. And Automation, I love the fact that they released it at DIY. Like you had to download the stems, you had to download the videos, because in everyone coming together, making their own remixes and making their own videos, they're contributing to that automation that Stu was warning us about. Everyone's kind of like, throwing their own digital footprints out there. And I think the lyrics of Automation are some of the most prophetic, intelligent lyrics, and it's one of my favorite songs on the album.
Yeah. I mean, it very much is, because like there is a lot of there's a lot of stuff going on with AI.
Yeah.
And and Stu has said in the past, like there's good AI and bad AI.
Yeah.
And just another podcast that I've been listening to and stuff you see in the news. And like the news doesn't really have a lot of reporters don't really have a full understanding or grasp of what AI entails or what it actually means for life.
Yeah, and Stu says everyone should be talking about this.
Yep.
The fact that not people are talking about stupid things like I'm so happy this album came out when it did, because just after the stupid election week, everyone, in the United States at least, was exhausted, and they're just like, we need something new, we need something. And King Giz came in like the heroes that they are and slam dunked us with 2 new albums, which were amazing. But Stu still took the reminder to take us like, hey, these are important things. This automation is something crazy. And I've been thinking about this a long time. I mean, like some of the most smart people in our country have been thinking about it. We've got Andrew Yang, Sam Harris, Elon Musk. All of these people have been talking a lot about AI, and they're kind of just brushed off as, whatever, we'll take care of it. But like, I think it's something that a lot of really, really intelligent people have been trumpeting for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, there's been that, and also you don't necessarily know like how nefarious their motives are, and
but we don't know if they have motives. It's just like there's no motive there. It's a computer. It'll do what it'll do. And if we're in a simulation, then there's that theory that we're in a simulation. Then it's just going to do what it's going to do. It doesn't need any rhyme or reason. We don't have to ascribe human motives to it. It does whatever it thinks it needs to do.
Yeah, and like just thinking back to like how. Like I used to work in tech, and in like a content producer role, but like whenever I was looking for other jobs, like they would like all these requirements would be like must be well versed in AI technology and stuff. I'm just like, I am not, but all of a sudden everywhere it's becoming like a prerequisite for like understanding, and it's only in that industry. Which is kind of terrifying, because it's like it's such a powerful thing. And also like it's, like being in my late 20s and already getting burned out on corporate life, like, and like just working to the point of basically like where automation would replace me. It's like, yeah, you don't know what like people just don't have a really good understanding as to and I know this is like convoluted, but they don't really have a good understanding as to like what they themselves are made of. They don't understand how they might feel should they just have everything done for them, and where then having everything done for them takes over their autonomy. And like that's what freaks me out about automation in general.
I mean, we're already seeing early signs of it, because we're already linking all of our social media things together, and then eventually that could be linked to, you're just going to get linked to your bank account. It could get linked to your social security, and eventually you're not even going to be you. You're just going to be like this collection of profiles and stuff that's kind of like centered on this one little AI cloud. I know these are things you think about when you're into Giz. And,
well, but even in general, I think like did you see The Social Dilemma on Netflix?
I did, yeah.
I mean, that, I think the fact that came out like the same week as Straws in the Wind as the video, like there were like with CGI Ambrose, like that was sort of
I love that.
It was hilarious, and it was creative, it was silly, but also it was so synchronous with like that one setting in The Social Dilemma, where it's like the personification of AI, those 3 dudes. and they're working with like some CGI, like human body.
Yeah.
And yeah, like it all ties in together so well. But yeah, I mean, like upon hearing Straws in the Wind, I was like, oh yeah, that's kind of all this is. Like, we are in effect becoming part of AI by being inundated with all the same information. It's kind of blowing around. It doesn't really matter, on our individual level. Like, it doesn't affect us individually, but because it's hacking into our collective psyche,
Hmm.
we, all of a sudden everybody cares. And now you have to be extremely careful with what you say, or else you might face some kind of backlash online. Like,
Hmm.
you know, it's like it's a slippery slope, and I think Straws in the Wind paints that picture, and automation takes it further.
Yeah.
And hopefully people do continue to talk about this, or have some sort of realization, because like King is all fun and games, like, for the most part, but there's also some real shit that they're getting at,
Yeah.
that can be taken seriously.
Yeah.
um
Definitely.
that was long-winded, but
No, everything you're saying, it makes perfect sense. And right, like we all know, ever since probably even the Mindfuss days, that these guys care about bigger issues than just these petty small issues. They care about the environment. They care about human autonomy. They care about making sure everyone is living their best life. Um, and their lyrics are really personal, and they say a lot of really important things, I think.
yeah. Oh, for sure. And like, because a lot of people, they try to paint King Giz into a box, or they might with certain singles or something, like with Planet B. You got like that energized, like the far left part of the Giz base, and which was great. It was a great message and everything. And then but then once you come up with that, then a lot of people will think like, oh well, they're always, they're definitely on my side completely, and it's like, no, they're just malleable and independent thinkers. It's
Yeah, I mean, Stu, when Stu won an award, he did say "F the right wingers," and that did annoy a lot of people. But
mhm.
you know, there was on Reddit and on Facebook, there's arguments. It's like, well, how can you assume that these bands aren't left wing? They're talking about these issues that they think that right wing people don't care about. And I mean, you can always go into the classical debate of like, what is right wing, what is left wing. But that, I mean, I love Stu, but when you say stuff like that, yeah, sure, you're gonna piss a lot of people off, especially the people that he's targeting. But he's saying all this stuff that like, obviously, if you hadn't listened to their music, it's the same thing with Roger Waters. Like,
Mhm.
people are shocked when Waters gets political. It's like, have you listened to his music? Have you listened? Do you know the guy? Same thing with Stu. When they get political and when they talk about issues, yeah, they're gonna throw around these words, and they might not be kind to your political affiliation, but sometimes you have to separate the art from the artist, and then sometimes the artist, they put themselves into the art, so you have to respect both of them a little bit.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think it's possible to have views, take whatever makes the most sense to you from all sides. Like, I grew up like a diehard liberal and everything, and for the most part, I would say I am. But like, ultimately, I don't want to be, I don't want to be grouped into any one thing. Um,
Yeah.
so like, and especially back to this point of like personal autonomy, like I think you need to let people feel what they're feeling,
Yeah.
and express it in some way that's like nonviolent. um
Right.
yeah, so like there's and I mean, like, when Stu says like, fuck the right wing and whatnot, it's like, I get that because I agree, but at the same time, that also doesn't necessarily mean that he's not an independent, or like that he might take a lot of issue with whatever the so-called left wing, and everybody's definition of wings, like you said, is different. um but yeah, I mean, it just goes back into like, hey, let's not try to be A and B divisive, like,
Right, and Australia, it's things are different in Australia. I mean, their politics are a little bit different than ours. The
mhm.
United States is pretty, in general, a pretty center right. I would say center right country, and people think that anything to the left of that is like, oh, you're a crazy socialist, or like, oh,
Mhm.
you're a crazy communist. It's like, no, that's just propaganda. It's just a smear campaign that they're using to try to win votes. When if
Yep.
you look at in the grand spectrum of things, like, no, like you can still get along and be a little bit left of center without having your country fall into total collapse like they are warning you about. And King Gizzard does talk about that stuff a lot. Like they talk about the cruel millennial, like they're kind of making fun of their generation a little bit, saying like, oh, our generation's a little bit addicted to technology, they're a little bit um I don't know. The Cruel Millennial was kind of a strange little song shoehorned into Fishing for Fishies.
Yeah, I mean, and like that was an Ambrose song, and it wouldn't surprise me if that was sort of born out of what he was writing for Manic Candid episode with the Murlocs, because that also kind of focused on sort of that kind of tangent, with like Comfort Zone and the title track itself, like, yeah, there's just a lot of it is kind of focused on that weird feeling you get of just like, ugh, like, what are we doing? Like,
Yeah.
Twitter's great for certain information, but it can quickly devolve into a toxic mess. I mean, you're the fucking admin of the Facebook fan page. Online toxicity better than anybody. It's
Yeah, but things have gotten a lot better on the page nowadays.
Oh.
I think especially since I think COVID has brought a lot of people together, even despite what the media is doing. Because Amber says the media will never quit, which is like a really great little line in Straws in the Wind, where he's saying like, oh, they're just focusing on this pandemic and causing everyone to panic for ratings.
Yeah.
Whereas it's like, no, people are in general kinder than that. And yeah, social media does exacerbate the worst in people, but you gotta take some of the bad with the good.
Yeah, and I mean, like I went to college for journalism, and we always had this. There's always this saying: if it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah,
And
dog bites man.
Yeah,
or man bites dog, or I think it was my man bites dog.
Well, I'm not familiar with that anymore.
Yeah, they're saying like oh, I think it's a phrase that's saying like, oh, if a dog bites a person, that's not really that interesting of a news story. But if a guy bites a dog, like, okay, that's an interesting news story.
Yeah.
It's unusual.
And I mean, definitely the more unusual, the better. But like ultimately, if it's at all gory and it inspires and like really hits with people's sick self,
there's a lot of our proclivities come to that disgust. Like one of these sensibilities that Jonathan Haidt, have you heard of Jonathan Haidt? He's a really smart philosopher and psychologist. He talks about this disgust thing, and the concept of disgust does drive a lot of our behaviors and our actions and what we do. Like leading it back to King Gizzard, that line that on Some of Us, where it says ancient microbes reveal xenophobes, where xenophobia is a natural human response to plagues and pandemics, because for centuries it kept the human population safe. When people would come into your tribe and they were carrying a foreign disease, they would spread disease into your population. Now, whether that originally started out as a mostly like physiological disease, parasites, bacteria, but soon that started evolving into mind viruses or different belief systems, where you keep the outsider out to preserve the sanctity of your own congregation. So disgust has kept human beings alive, and it helped in our evolution in terms of filtering the bad out from the good. But it also then led to our racist rhetoric and our horrible xenophobia that can happen. That we see especially with coronavirus. There's a lot of anti-Asian rhetoric that started to pop up amongst some political groups. But we know that is just a very base thing that kept human beings alive for such a long time, magnified and sort of amplified to a crazy scale.
Yeah, I mean,
and cooking hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, that's another thing I love about Giz, because with the like when Stu went on KEXP and did that isolated tracks thing, and he was they were asking him, what do you do with these, like, about the lyrics, like, because it seems so timely. He's like, oh yeah, well, I'll go rework them, like just before it goes to production, because like, you want to make it relevant, and like it's also, it just made so much sense. But it was so cool to hear like that line on an album coming out the same year as COVID. I mean, it is totally true.
And KG does seem to be like an album that kind of exemplifies this whole coronavirus thing and just distills 2020 as a whole into this crazy scrambled mess. There's so many issues to talk upon that they have to pick and choose carefully, and it's nice that they have that much sense in their songwritings to sort of hit on these really big button issues.
Yeah. I mean, just, yeah. I think just something else I've been thinking about is like with Red Rocks, scheduled for next year, like, and just we're going into, like, I guess another somewhat pseudo shutdown, or like there are curfews everywhere. It feels like we're headed towards some kind of I don't know. I don't want to manifest the wrong thing, but it's gotten me worried about about like what'll happen next year. Are they going to have to postpone again, and at that point it's just going to get canceled? But it's had me thinking about that, and like ultimately I just decided yesterday to make a vision board, just to like manifest Red Rocks. Like I found a clip from a magazine that just said COVID-19 vaccine, so
I think I saw that
right in the center.
Your Instagram.
I put it up there. We got to manifest that shit. I just took like some rocks or like I guess a landscape from Mars, and just made that the Red Rocks. But nice. Red Mars for the poor, right? That's what I guess is what Red Rocks is. Although you can't really be broke and go, but I don't know. Anyway, we're devolving. But anyway, we have been going for a while. What's something that you've been thinking about, Giz related, that we haven't talked about on this episode?
I mean, we covered the new albums which came out. They released their Gizverse USA, which I think is just a portal to their American web store. ATO Records, if you look on their Facebook page, I think I'm not sure if it's Dave as in Dave Matthews, but there was a post written by Dave from ATO, and he talks about how Live in San Francisco came to be, how he found it on a hard drive and he was like, oh my god, this is great, so he sent it to Stu for mastering. But yeah, I think if people want to get a interesting insight into like an outsider's perspective of that album, they can go check out that Facebook post. But King Gizzard is just, they're still doing their things. I'm excited for what they have next. Is there anything that you had on your mind about the band?
God, I always have things about my mind. I have things about the band on my mind. Like, I mean, it seriously sends me into like an ADD spiral, which is like how we got here. And like I mean, I've been thinking a lot about just because there have been some tracks like Ontology, for example. That one seems to be kind of like this sort of like grand kind of Western style song. And like I have been talking about, like this had come up as like one of the speculative pieces on this podcast over the summer, but like I was talking with somebody about like what if they did some kind of like doom Western type of album, where like we get that Eyes Like the Sky type of sound with some more flavor.
I thought I remembered reading somewhere that they wanted to do a sequel to Eyes Like the Sky, where Miguel ended up in some mining town. I really can't remember. I'm racking my brain for these different interviews, but I remember they said they were thinking about doing a sequel where he goes to some other area. I'm not sure if it's in America or like Japan. I really like, there's so many interviews with Giz, you tend to forget some of the things. But the thing about Ontology that kind of interested me, and it just hit me the other day. So Ontology, I think, is about it's about the concept of philosophy. They ask all these philosophical questions like, why do we think? Who are we? All those questions. Why is there anything? And typically, when you think about philosophy, there's two types of philosophy. I think in the general, you have Eastern philosophy and Western philosophy. Mm-hmm. So the song Ontology, like they have it sounds kind of like a mix of like a Middle Eastern song, and then you have your Western, which is kind of like the cowboy stuff. So I think it's an homage to like the fact that there's Eastern philosophies and Western philosophies, and the song is kind of a nice marriage of the two styles where you have East and West combining into this cool little jam.
Oh, I love that. I mean, that's a notion that I've just sort of been experiencing on my own the last few years, is just like, yeah, sort of taking like looking into Taoism and like Hinduism and stuff, and just sort of like sort of contrasting that with like Carl Jung and like Freudian psychology and stuff, and just like other Western philosophers. Like there is value in so much of it, and like I think it like that's how you achieve harmony, right? Is like by merging and coming up with some kind of product that takes the good from both.
Yeah. And you can tell that Stu definitely spends a lot of time probably reading. I think he says he reads a lot of philosophy and he reads a lot of theology works. Well, not exactly theology, probably more philosophy and psychology. I think he said he was a fan of Freud, and he also likes science fiction, and a lot of concepts of science fiction do kind of meld with philosophy. Mm-hmm. But the song is, these questions that are asked in the song are things that are common in all schools of philosophy. People, why are we here? What's the purpose of life? Why does the universe exist? Why are we here? All those questions are sort of universal, and that song does a nice kind of almost tongue-in-cheek way of kind of marrying two styles of music together. And then there's that cool like little guitar solo at the end, which is awesome.
Yeah, I mean it's in that what a way to like start that song too. Just that woo,
Yeah.
Like, and I would assume that like that's how side B of the record starts.
Yeah. That's side B. But even still, if you listen to it on a nice, on Spotify or all in a row on your MP3s, mm-hmm. it goes right from the end of Some of Us, which the end is da 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 woo, and then you kind of get into the next song. So it sort of still goes with the time, and I feel like the transitions on this album are amazing. They're like Nonagon Infinity style transitions that we're seeing, especially side B.
Yeah, I mean the transitions on this album I think they're so different because like even though sure Volume 1, Flying Microtonal Banana, they transitioned pretty seamlessly. Like these are,
but it's mostly the songs on Microtonal Banana usually tend to kind of like fade out, and then something else kind of comes in. This one, they do something with the beat, and kind of like a DJ mixes two songs together. Mm-hmm. They sort of mix they have a little intermediate beat, and then it goes into the next song. Yeah, especially with Intrasport and Odd Life, I love that transition.
Yeah, that one's great, and even from Ontology into Intrasport, like it's. I mean, honestly, like that 3-song block is my favorite from the album. And I mean, I just love how they've basically accelerated the segue, the transitions, but yet it's still so crisp and it flows and it grooves really hard. And and like the fact that now there are songs that you can legitimately dance to if you can dance. I can't.
Like you can probably play Intrasport in a club and have people like not leave immediately.
Yeah.
That's the song. It's a song that I sent to like my sister, she's not a huge King Gizzard fan, but I know that she's a Britney Spears fan, and I'm like, hey, it's essentially Microtonal Britney Spears, like the way that his voice he sounds like Britney Spears. And even in the Instagram post, he had #FreeBritney, which kind of I think the song was kind of like a pop song. His attempt at making a Britney Spears like a pop song, but the lyrics, they're dark. I think they're about a serial killer or someone dissociating right before they go on a bloodlust and a murder. It's again, King Gizzard is an expert at making beautiful, lovely harmonies and contrasting it with dark, horrifying, depressing lyrics.
Yeah, I mean,
especially Joey.
Yeah, and Joey has like such a sense of humor about himself that like you know, even though he's serious, it's also just like, well, this is what it is, and inherently that's funny to him, or at least it's funny to me. It's I like you know, with like the Straws in the Wind video, him doing the leaf blower solo, like
Oh
he's
yeah,
such
yeah,
a
yeah.
silly dude,
Yeah.
and
He's definitely I think he's the jokester, the funny one of the group. If you had to, paint all of them as a picture, like Lucas is the quiet one, and well, I think Lucas and Cookie are both the quiet ones.
but Cookie, I think
Cookie's shy, but also he's like a subtle genius, I think.
oh yeah, I mean, I compare his writing style to Seinfeld all the time, like
Yeah.
because he's also
Observational.
observational, bleak, but yet kind of hilarious too.
Yeah.
And
Whimsical, a little bit whimsical too. Like
very.
Sweets and Treats. Come on, that's a great song.
Yeah, I mean, all of Inside Outside, that Pipe Eye album is,
Mhm.
it's like a really whimsical sort of journey through Cookie's mind. It seems like, but yeah. Anyway, Dave, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
For sure. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, this is a fucking blast, and yeah, everybody. If you're somehow not on the King Gizzard fan page on Facebook, get on there. Dave runs it. It's sick. And it's like where we get to, convene outside of this podcast and,
Yeah.
On a much grander scale. You have more than 60 people in that group. So,
Yeah. The one thing I'm going to say before I go is my favorite thing to see on the page, which I've seen a little bit of recently. I commented on it. It was one of the things that sticks out in my mind, and one of the main reasons that we made the page in the first place. A bunch of people from the Facebook group got together and they did a cover of "I'm in Your Mind, Fuzz." And even through this crazy pandemic, they all recorded their own individual parts, and then they assembled it, and it is a killer cover. But that's my favorite thing to see, is people coming together for this love of this insanely amazing band that we all love. And even in the most dark time, one of the most dark years in human history, they managed to come together and make art, make something amazing, make something beautiful. And that's the one thing I love to see on the page. And I hope to see more of it. And also dank memes, because who doesn't love dank memes, right?
Right. Anyway, thank you so much for coming on. And yeah, take it easy, man.
Yeah.
Stay safe.
See you, John.